Hello, everybody. I hope you are having a wonderful start to your week. I hope it's better than the weekend, of course. Pharmaceutical Soccer here to talk about all your fun Nashville soccer things. If there is any fun Nashville soccer things to talk about, I'm, of course, here with Clay Trainum and Valer Shabilla. I am excited to be here with the both of you. It's always good to start the weeks off in this way, but then I realize the topic that we have to talk about, and it's not as fun, and I don't want to be doing that. But I love you both. So, how are your weekends? Did you have a good weekend?
My weekend started in Evansville, Indiana, so it wasn't ideal. Not that Evansville was bad, but the reason I was there was not fun. And then came home and it wasn't too bad before the Nashville SC game. I was doing all right. I did some smoked queso, cooked a little
Ooh,
bit. And then I watched Everton win 5 home games in a row that they got to win. That hasn't happened in quite a long time. uh, you know, nice and safe, setting the stage for Arsenal to completely punt it on the last day of the season potentially against Everton. We'll see what happens. And then I watched the Nashville game, and yesterday I went to Costco. So a full a full weekend.
what a weekend. Valer, what's going on with you, man?
Uh,
It's been a weird kind of start to this recording for you already. Was that what your weekend was like, or was it good?
yeah, it was interesting. I did a lot of work outside. I think I recently told you like a month ago or so, I finally like mowed my own lawn for the first time. So it's been I've been kind of getting accustomed to that a little bit. So I did some work there, you know, cleaned up the carport. I was outside for a little bit, but that also meant that my allergies were absolutely murdering me. So it's been it's been hard to breathe, which usually is hard for me to breathe at night, as most of you already know. But this has been hard to breathe in the day as well at night. So, uh, you know, um, it's just another weekend with spend some time with the girlfriend and
Hey, shout out
played
to
some video
Maroon
games.
5.
I will say better than Nashville SC. I mean, I watched Fallout and
Great
I am
show.
now playing the game. So if you are into, sci-fi shows, I don't even know if is it. Yeah, it's sci-fi.
I
Yeah.
mean, I would consider it
Um.
sci-fi. It's like a
Yeah.
video
Yeah.
game, a video game spin-off
Yeah.
that's a sci-fi game. I would go sci-fi.
But yeah, post-apocalyptic type of thing. Super into the show, loved it. And then now I'm playing the game, which I know a lot of people love. I am still getting used to it. It's a bit too big for me. But I did something during the week, which wasn't at the weekend, but I went to a yoga class
Oh,
for
wow.
like for the first time in my life. Yeah, not for me. Yeah, yeah, I knew the instructor very well. Let's just say that. So was doing it. Was trying to test things out. Same instructor as one time for Alex Muyl. So take that as you would, I guess.
Shout out to because you had mentioned watching a movie. I watched The Rookie featuring Dennis Quaid.
What?
So shout out to Dennis Quaid. He married a University of Evansville student a few years ago. Don't ask about the age difference, but shout out to Dennis Quaid.
Oh my gosh. I
I
can't.
watched that while doing an unbelievable amount of work on Nashville Soccer Archive, getting some of the web stuff reset and reorganized, which I'm very proud of. But I did notice something when I did that, and this is interesting. If you go to any of the MLS club schedule pages from last year or the year before or the year before that, well, I guess the year before that didn't happen, and click on their Open Cup results, they're all dead links. You can't get Nashville SC's results from the Open Cup via any MLS website, which I found interesting. And I'll just
Nash-
leave it at that.
Nashville SC help us. We are now giving shout outs to Dennis Quaid on this podcast and talking about some breaking news of dead links to the Open Cup on MLS websites. This is what
I'm
we have
just
to
Not
talk
saying,
about.
I'm just saying that
MLS.
that's interesting.
MLS changed their stats provider recently, and I would wager a lot of money that has to do with that.
Everything except the US Open Cup works on every website.
But it hasn't worked very well. Let's just say that.
I know that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, considering the news of the last 6 months, that's just an interesting piece of information.
Which, by the way, the U.S. Open Cup has had some really good stories out there. I mean, um, like every year it delivers. I think there are incredible stories there. If you haven't obviously been following because Nashville SC aren't in it, I understand. But if you have some time to browse around and see, it's still my favorite competition in U.S. soccer. Um, even when Nashville's not in it, even when I guess I don't even have a team to root for. But I'm obviously rooting for the underdogs many times. Funny thing is, the only third division team to be still in it right now is NYCFC 2, which is I don't know. I don't know what to take from that. But there's MLS and USL teams make up the rest of it. So really exciting stuff there. Definitely check out the US Open Cup if you haven't.
And for those who are curious who Steven's rooting for, it's definitely Detroit
Shut
City.
up.
Yes,
Shut
big
up.
fan.
I was
Big
just
fan.
about to talk
Huge.
about how I don't
He
care about
loves
the
Les Rouge.
Shut up. God, why? Again, Nashville SC, please help us. We can't be doing this every single time. Like, we had our hopes up, everything was going great, and now I think the funniest thing, and I would like to screenshot this and put this on our Twitter. It would have been the greatest Twitter poll of all time. Our rundown for today's episode is hilarious. So, segment one, we have weekend update, which we just completed with other injections. Congratulations. The next point for what we're talking about is like a lot of UGHs. And then the third point that we are going to talk about in this first segment is I don't know.
We don't need to be telling people how unprofessional our rundown is, Steven, okay?
Well, you see my back
Hey, it's
starting
more
to hurt.
professional than Nashville SC's attack was on Saturday. I don't know what to tell you. There's a lot more in our rundown than Nashville SC's attack had.
So I tried to come up with something for the poll, but I forgot until 30 minutes ago. So that's on me. There wasn't a poll, but
Hey,
I think
significantly less cursing when you do the rundown versus when I do the rundown. So I'll give you that.
yeah. Maybe we'll start with this. I was at the training facility just about an hour ago, left there. I don't want to say they're in high spirits because I don't think that's the right word. I think they're all working to kind of get something out. I think they're feeling the players and the coaches. I think they're feeling this feeling is not just the fans. I don't think there's anything about it that's kind of like casual or business as usual. I think they're really understanding the magnitude of this, and this is the first time that they're experiencing being this low down the table, just like the fans and the media and everybody's experiencing that. So I will say they're working, I guess, pretty hard as you would imagine, and trying to keep everything going for this 2-game week coming up.
I will say this, and albeit I've never been in a professional locker room, but I have, that was my job. I worked in sports for over a decade, and there's nothing to be gained by just being sad the whole time. Like, you have to move forward. And this is, I know all of us watch the Welcome to Wrexham doc because it's interesting. And the first 3 episodes of this season have largely focused on how bad Wrexham was at the start of the League Two campaign they're in. This most recent one was about them losing 5-0 to Stockport. And in the moment, they're irate, like they're in the locker room cussing at each other, blaming each other. Game ends, the coach, gets what he needs to get out, which includes a lot of choice language. And then this is something new. We haven't dealt with this before. Let's get the hell out of here and get started on the next game. And when you have a performance like that against Charlotte, obviously there's other things going on. But when you have a performance like that against Charlotte, that's the only thing you can do. You're not going to take a step forward if you keep moping about it. You just have to take the result, take your lumps, move on. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but there's no way it works if you just sit there and mope about it.
And that is the nature of the regular season, right? I mean, there's especially when you have a game 3 days later. I mean, there's just a little time to go over every single detail and kind of stay about it. And I think sometimes for Nashville SC, it might make sense for them to have a week in between and go over every little detail. For this Charlotte match, I don't think there's a lot of film that's going to be done from it. Let's just say that it played out in a way that is not constructive to go back to it. I think.
Well, shoot, do you
This
think the
from my
players want to watch
humble
that
opinion.
match? I'm already mad I had to. If I was a
Exactly.
player, I wouldn't want to watch that match again.
Exactly.
Um, this this is a story from several years ago. Uh, when I was working for Ball State men's basketball, right? We had one of our worst performances of the season at Butler. I hate Butler, but I've nothing better than Butler losing in my life. But I hate Butler. And so we went down to Butler and we lost to them. And normally the coaches would sit at the front of the bus and then support staff, which is what I was a part of, and then players at the back. What they decided to do instead was put the support staff in front, players in the middle, coaches at the back. They put the game on the TV for the entire trip back to Muncie from Indianapolis so that they could make sure every player was watching the game. So, like, it was so bad. They wanted them to relive it to make sure it didn't happen again. It didn't work. We were terrible that year, but like it's just
Well,
like
that's
a
great
vivid memory.
foreshadowing. Great foreshadowing for this year
Again,
coming up.
so my point was you gain nothing from watching it.
Look, I mean, I I think some of this as well when it comes to the Charlotte match too is we had a lot of hopes based on last week, putting in a really good performance against a not very good Montreal team, but still put in like at least a performance. And I mean, we know Charlotte's not very good as well, and we'll go into more detail about the match here in the next segment. But I mean, vibes wise, it just seems like we're back to what we were feeling at the beginning of the season.
It's just more of the same, really, and that doesn't mean it's good. But whether Nashville went and got a draw or a win in Charlotte, these next two games were, the kind of decider. They have to win it, and I don't think that changes with a loss. I think even if they won a Charlotte, they're not. I think the vibes and maybe like some of the what's the word I'm looking for? So some of the instruction would be maybe a little different, but overall, I think Gary said it after the Montreal game. They took so many steps back that one win doesn't mean anything, and I don't think that Charlotte win was going to mean much. I mean, I really think the message is the exact same. Go out there. There are two home games. You have to win it, and those two home games are not against the best of the best. I mean, Toronto's pretty good, and then you have Atlanta who are struggling bad right now. You have to go and get points there, regardless of what you did in Charlotte.
Yeah, and I would agree that the thing that frustrated me most coming out of the Charlotte game is even though like San Jose was a bad result and there were other bad results before there, but San Jose was like a singularly terrible result. Like there were things that you could point to coming out of the game, like, oh, this guy missed some of these chances, these crosses were good, they didn't do anything with it, things like that. The San Jose game was still a woeful performance. I'm not dismissing it, but the month before the Montreal game, you could feel it was building to something. And so Montreal is a good performance, and then immediately Charlotte comes after, and there's genuinely not a whole lot you can take out of that performance. There's some like defensive things, but even then, 1 minute of just awful defense kind of overshadowed everything else. And so like that's the most frustrating part about it is like because you could like pick little things like this is a thing you can build on, this is a good thing you can build on. This guy came back from an injury. This Charlotte game, there's not a whole lot there to be happy about or excited about, other than Shaq Moore coming back. But even then,
I think to me, what makes me really frustrated with this is just how tight it is in the Eastern Conference still down here. Because when you look at the table right now, we're 11 or 12 games in, depending on which team you're looking at, and Nashville is a point away from Atlanta and Orlando, which if you had said that to anyone before the season started, you would think that meant that they are fourth, fifth, worst case scenario, sixth. But no, they are 13th, and they are a point away from Orlando and Atlanta. And they are 4 points away from New England, who are definitively the last place team here. The thing that bothers me is that how close, like how some small decisions can have this Nashville team well above Atlanta and Orlando, and that the fact that this little mistake here and there is what caused them to be in the situation they're in. And I know those are small margins within the larger picture, but like just they're not too far, even with everything going on this season. They are still within 6 points from automatic playoff position, which is ridiculous to say, and a game in hand, by the way, which is ridiculous to say for a team that has performed as bad as Nashville.
And to continue with bad performances, we have to continue doing this show and talk about this Nashville SC match that I'm extremely excited to talk about. We're going to do that next right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer. And we are back right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer, of course, at Pharma Soccer on our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. If you did not know already, we do have a Patreon as well. You can go check us out at Pharma Soccer. You can help keep the lights on for the show.
I will say that if someone wants to listen to this podcast after Charlotte, chances are they're on the Patreon. Because this one's for the true believers.
Well,
Anybody
look, if you want to
show.
listen to this show even after that match, I mean, you might as well just become a Patreon member at this point. Like, you're just as much down this train as us, and you should be supporting this show so we can keep doing this for you.
We're happy you're here. We're not judging your life. We're just saying.
The Patreon is $5 a month, which is just as much as a cup of coffee from somewhere that is subpar. So please join us. $5 a month mean the world to us. Thank you.
It's only half the price of a soda at Geodis Park.
It's literally at 1/3 of a beer at Geodis Park.
So,
I don't even think you can get a hot dog at Geodis Park for $5.
yeah.
And that we're just asking you to do that once a month. They're asking you to do it like once a week.
I mean, if we put it in XG terms, like $5 would be like 0.5 XG. It would be like half of what Nashville, like the effort that Nashville put in.
Look, I don't drink, obviously, but I could argue that NSC is asking you to buy beer way more than once per week right now with the way they're playing.
Buy beer at Geodis Park. Well, twice this week.
Yeah. Maybe conspiracy theory. Maybe the team plays boring so people buy more alcohol and they make more on concessions. Ooh.
There you go. Put that out. Put that out on Twitter. I'm sure some people will take you up on it.
Oh, absolutely. That'll absolutely
go
down some rabbit hole. Wow.
Speaking of
Great.
Twitter,
I'll get another phone call I don't need to get. Thanks.
I am
It's X.
I'm getting tired of Twitter, man. I'm getting tired of it. Let me air it out, Valere it out real quick. I'm getting tired of it. That's all I gotta say. Let's go into the game, I guess. I don't want to go into any further. Just getting tired of Twitter. That's all. Yep. I'm giving up. I don't want to do it.
Speaking of giving up, Nashville SC also decided to give up on Saturday against Charlotte. I mean, look, it's going to be hard to talk about this game when it comes to, I think Clay said it in the first segment best. Any sort of positive to come out of this game is kind of just null and void because there wasn't a ton and not a ton to build off of. We go into, Montreal scoring 4 goals, and then we have one of the worst XGs we've ever had in the history of our club in one match. So it makes it kind of tough, but Charlotte walking away with a 1-0 win. How do you say the guy's name for Charlotte? Ajman? Yeah. They don't even need a DP striker because they have a pretty good one on their hands. It seems like just from his performance against Nashville, probably could have had a couple. But look, couple switches, in that match. Gary did talk about there needing to be a little bit of turnover with, having a 2-match week this week, with Toronto and Atlanta coming up. But taking Lovitz out of the lineup specifically, Zimmerman looking like he needed to get that rest.
No, he brought Lovitz back into the lineup.
Oh, sorry, brought Lovitz back into the lineup. That's my bad.
Yes.
into
Yeah.
that left side. That's right, because I was used to him playing a center back now. Now I don't know what Lovitz does when it comes to positioning or anything anymore. And then you wouldn't know it. But it was really good to see the ghost of Tyler Boyd on the pitch as well during that match too. And definitely, to me, the Tyler Boyd thing seemed extremely out of position. I'm not sure specifically. It didn't seem like he was moving forward at all. It seemed like he was more in that central midfielder role, which is just not his strong suit. But I mean, look, that first half was just as boring, if not more boring, than the Colorado first half, I would say, this year. I mean, I don't know. From a Nashville side, it was actually pretty good because there was nothing happening on the offense from Charlotte as well. Just nothing happened specifically at all.
Yeah, I mean it's not a nice watch. I don't think it's fun or entertaining, but I think looking at how things unfolded, Charlotte would have been the more frustrated side out of the first half because the onus is on them. They're playing at home. They're trying to break Nashville down, and Nashville was pretty good and kind of held them to. I don't think Charlotte even had a shot on target the first half. I think Nashville had the only two shots on target, which weren't threatening by any means. But I mean, if they're not taking even shots on target, then they're not really creating a whole lot. I would say Nashville looked better throughout the first half. Overall, I think they looked more threatening. The one thing I was a little surprised about, and something we talked about, and I think Stephen, you asked us if we thought Nashville would come out swinging in this game, and both Clay and I were like, "Yeah, I don't see why not." Like the first 10 minutes, there's this whole thing where Nashville pushes and are pressing really hard and doing that. They didn't do that. They didn't do that. They sat back, and I thought that was an interesting thing because as far as I remember, even away from home, like even the Miami match, if you think about it, Nashville did that. So I was just curious, like why Gary Smith would opt out of that. I think let's go ahead and address this. The pitch, the turf, I should say, was a big talking point. Jacob Schaffelbrick talked about it today. Gary Smith has talked about it for as long as he's been manager of Nashville. The players don't move as freely on the pitch when it's turf. The ball doesn't move as freely, and the players were kind of held back. I mean, in Walker Zimmerman's case, he literally wasn't on the field for the first half because it was turf. That's what Gary Smith said, at least.
The turf thing really stuck out to me, especially because Nashville's passing looked as bad as it ever has at times in that game, where a ball is played in between two people when normally that would be a pretty simple pass to make. I will say there were also a couple things in the first half that, had Nashville scored, I think they may have looked at it for potentially being onside when they flagged offside because there were a couple of really close ones in the first half, but it didn't really matter because Nashville didn't like put it on target or score or anything like that. So I think that it was the type of game where if Nashville manages something from I don't even want to say half chance, but like quarter chance that they may have created in the first half, I think we see a game that works out a lot differently. But that turf really, really stuck out. Like I was getting frustrated just watching the passing alone. And Nashville at times goes through patches where they don't pass particularly well in the midfield. So it's kind of hard to put that just on turf, but it was something that stuck out because I couldn't come up with any other reason for it being as off as it was at times.
I also think switching to this back three puts a lot of pressure on the three center backs to be able to play with the ball. And Nashville isn't a team that's known to be able to play with the ball. And we saw last year, all of a sudden they decided to play out from the goalkeeper instead of playing it long. And Joe Willis had that one big mistake and had a couple smaller mistakes. And then this year, Panico had that big mistake when it comes to playing out of the back. So these players are, and Joe Willis now, I think he has gotten better even at his age. He's been able to develop into being more comfortable on his feet. Now, when you look at somebody like Josh Bauer or Kelman or even Jack Mayer, no offense to those guys, but they are center backs and they play like they are center backs and they're not comfortable with the ball. It's different when you have a guy like Walker Zimmerman out there who is comfortable having the ball on his feet. Now, when you go to a back three, generally your first line is those three center backs receiving the ball probably passing it around each other, then going into midfield. And like Clay said, they just weren't able to get the ball out of their feet, and they looked so out of place whenever they had the ball there. Those three center backs, every time they received the ball, they seemed nervous to me. I don't know if that I'm reading too much into it, but it just didn't seem like they had that sort of assertiveness and that comfortable like persona or body language that says, I know what to do with this ball. It seemed like they were always like walking on eggshells, and then they just tried to get the pass out as soon as possible to either Godoy or Yearwood or whoever was around, Muyel as well. And I think that created some nervousness at the back that just didn't need to happen. And Ajimon, even in the first half, had a really good moment where he megged Kalman, I want to say. He got the kind of battled for the ball, megged Kalman, and made a run. Now, nothing came out of it, but those sort of moments where the defense is kind of unsure, I think created what eventually led to the goal, even though overall Nashville played really well defensively.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that probably nervousness led to Gary Smith making that switch at halftime to put on Zimmerman, where it did seem like it just that cohesiveness in that back line just wasn't ready to go, and that's what led to that goal from Ajiman.
Yeah, and when that goal went in, it felt like it was coming because literally 30 seconds to a minute before that goal, it was a very similar action, same thing. And we don't really see this happen a lot, but Zimmerman and Mayer just got bullied. And I I was kind of surprised by it. And I will say this, is as the game went on after that, Ajimon was way more frustrated with him physically because he went at Zimmerman a few more times to try and see if he could do it again, and it did not happen. And I think maybe that's specifically on the goal where Zimmerman gets just completely cleared out. Like, I don't think that happens if Zimmerman's an every week player. I think that is him getting back to full fitness, him coming into a game cold. I think these are things that played a part in it. But obviously, Jack Mayer goes in a couple times on both of those chances for Ajimong and comes up completely empty both times. But like, I will say that minute was like probably the worst of Jack Mayer's career playing for Nashville. But I do want to like also remind people that after that, that physical advantage that Ajimong had kind of dissipated a little bit. He still had some nice bits. He's still a good player. He's still going to have some moments, but he wasn't able to take advantage physically in the way that he did in those two plays. And that's because that wrong time to be getting to be trying to get ready to play in a game like that for Walker Zimmerman, and you feel bad for him. But I think he rose up to that level of what was required after that.
And I don't think I think I've seen a lot of people being like, "Oh, like Gary lost this game because he put Zimmerman in." I'm sorry, putting in your DP center back for a journeyman essentially. Sorry, no offense to Coleman. I'm not calling him out or anything. He had a really good first half with maybe one slight mistake, but I don't think anyone, and not a single person, including Coleman, looked at that substitution and was like, "Oh, that's dangerous." I don't think anybody looked at that way. Unfortunately for Walker, he that stability he brings to the back, just because he came in cold to the game, like Clay said, I don't think he was able to bring that same thing. And I truly believe that if Walker Zimmerman started that match, I don't think that goal happens, at least not in the way that it ended up happening. Because I think he'll be sharper. I think he'll be more game fit. And I think I think Jack Mayer would react differently if Walker was there the whole time.
And let's be honest, if we're sitting here and Nashville loses 1-0 to a different goal, but Walker Zimmerman spends the entire time on the bench, everyone's wondering why did Coleman stay on the bench?
Yep.
Walker Zimmerman, for everything that he is defensively, which is pretty good, is too important offensively for what Nashville wants to do. Whether like last week against Montreal, making the run that opens up the space for the surge goal, or just set pieces. He is arguably the best player in the air in all of MLS, especially off of corners. Yeah, if you're chasing a game, especially a game like this in Nashville where the midfield's getting bullied, you're not really getting anything. You need somebody who can do stuff on set pieces, and Walker is kind of the only dependable guy that Nashville has on his roster that can put it in the back of the net off a set piece. And so he's got to be in the game defensively and offensively. So anybody that's concerned that Coleman was having a good game and came out kind of detached from reality.
Yeah, but one thing we do know that when Nashville does go down a goal is that Nashville is absolutely going to fight and push forward where they're going to come back into the game at some point in it. Oh, shoot. Sorry, I'm talking about a different team. Sorry, my bad. I'm talking about Nashville SC. That's right. Yeah, even after we went down a goal, it did not seem like we had just anything going forward. I mean, I think in ways that you could talk in details about specific players, but like I think the best way is to overall look at it. Where the hell did the offense go?
You're muted, Clay.
I said this on Twitter. Sorry. I said this on Twitter during the game, is that Nashville falls out of a balanced attack when they really need a goal sometimes. And against San Jose, they were getting space on crosses from out wide. So they just used that as a reason to put in nothing but crosses. It's all they did. And those are inherently low proposition goal scoring chances. But they just kept pumping in crosses and they didn't really do anything other than that when they were chasing a goal to try and, take the lead in that game. Similarly, the Charlotte game, they had some success early on going over the top, but Nashville was offside, what, 7, 8 times in that game. And all they kept, excuse me, all they kept doing against Charlotte was still try to go over the top. That becomes easier and easier to defend because it becomes more predictable and more predictable and more predictable. And Nashville really has a problem with figuring that out. When they're chasing a game, they need to change some things up. They did switch out of a back five to a back four. They did try a little bit, but the end result was still trying to do the same thing, which was hit somebody over the top, try and get in behind the defense. And that just wasn't working. And it didn't seem like there was a plan B there.
I think also for Mukhtar, Suraj, Tyler Boyd, these are important players for Nashville SC, and I don't think any of them had the best game or a good game even. And I don't mean that to just pick those three out. I mean, but what you're looking for is somebody to get you out of that trouble, somebody to not rely on the cross. Maybe do it what Mukhtar did against San Jose, right? Something like that where you take a shot and it's one of those incredible shots that go in. Now Mukhtar, nobody can rely on Mukhtar doing this every week. I understand that, but some of these other players have to come in. And then the other thing you have to talk to mention is that Jacob Schaffer didn't come into the game until very late, way later than I think any of us wanted him to come in. And Gary Smith said they missed him on Saturday. Those were Gary's words this morning. Now, why didn't he want to play him? Because I think he has 2 home games, and with the way Jacob Schaffer plays, there's no way he plays 3 games in a week. So they're like, if we can have him, we'll rather have him at home than away. But not to Daniel Levels plays that position completely different than Jacob Schaffelberg, and because of that, you were hoping that Tyler Boyd kind of picks up that attacking momentum because he's on that left side pretty heavily. So you were hoping that attacking sort of momentum is picked up by Tyler Boyd, but unfortunately for him, he seemed very frustrated on the night. Sam Surge seemed really frustrated on the night, and that's the one thing I wanted to touch on for Nashville SC. It just seems like that belief after that first goal goes in, it's so hectic and it's so like just the body language looks so bad. And I don't want to read into the body language too much because obviously we don't know what the players are thinking. But man, when that goal went in, it just seemed like all hope was lost already. But it was so early on. It was just a really like not great thing to see.
Yeah, and I think so. A couple things. I think Surge is it's as isolated as he'd ever looked in a Nashville game, which is saying a lot because he looks isolated in a lot of Nashville games. But with the Schaffelberg side of things, like I understood when he didn't come in around the 60, 65th minute because they had to figure out something in the midfield. The midfield was just getting completely overpowered. But yeah, it feels like Schaffelberg should have come in about 10 minutes earlier than he did, and maybe they could have made something of the game. I think Charlotte was still there for the taking. They just didn't seem to have a whole lot of ideas until they switched the formation with about 15 minutes left and got Schaffelberg in.
Yeah, but with a busy week coming up, the team's gotta get going, and we're gonna see what the team does, and we're gonna talk about the next 2 matches up here next, right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer. back right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer at Pharmasoccer on our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And if you did not know, we also have a Patreon. We talked about it in the second segment. If you are listening to the show this week, as we discussed, you're probably already a part of it. But if you're not, you're already here. So would love to help. Would love to have you keep the lights on, all that fun type of stuff for the show, so we can bring this content to you every single week. Look, it was MLS rivalry week this weekend as well, which led to some interesting matches and fun, including a brawl between a team that we are playing on Wednesday. So that was interesting. Anything else that stuck out to you over the weekend when it came to MLS rivalry week?
Another team Nashville SC is playing is Atlanta, and they are not doing great. I know we're getting into that later, so I'll stop there. Another thing is Miami just destined? Is their whole strategy is to let other teams score on them first to then come back? Is are the script writers messing with us here? This is the question to the room.
I don't know. I thought the script writers were there until Messi was out for that 2 minutes, and then that banger of a free kick was scored not by Messi. That was not in the script at all.
The rivalry thing is funny to me because obviously when Nashville entered MLS, the folks who had been around for USL all considered FC Cincinnati Nashville's rival. Like I think we all would still rather beat Cincinnati than Atlanta. And the talking point from Nashville was that they don't want FC Cincinnati to be their rival because Atlanta is, one of the best teams in North America at the time, and FC Cincinnati's terrible. And so here we are several years later, and Atlanta and Nashville are in the running for which coach is going to get fired first. FC Cincinnati's having another great season. So,
Speaking of Cincinnati, they did beat Columbus in Columbus, so hell is real. Really good rivalry, I think one of the best. I do want to touch on St. Louis beating Chicago because those teams are in different conferences that don't get to play often. But man, I would love a consistent Chicago St. Louis match because those two cities hate each other in all the other sports. So it kind of adds up. Funny story, the only MLB game I've ever been to in my life was Cardinals versus Cubs in Chicago. So I don't know. Take that.
I don't know.
I was at the same game.
I know Clay used to be a Chicago fan at some point. I don't know if Chicago will ever be good at soccer again.
That's a fair point. It's a fair point. It's hard to imagine a way out for I could go on for this for a while, but what I will say is that there is no reason a team playing this sport in Chicago should struggle as much as Chicago Fire struggles, whether that's with fans, whether that's with signing people, whether that's with having competent people in the front office, people who know what they're doing on the pitch. Like they're bad at basically all of those things. And it's cost them most of their diehard fans from whenever I followed the team, religiously and would pay way more than it cost for the MLS season pass for direct kick. So like it's incredible. It's incredible to watch from afar how far that play because they used to be the model that you would base your organization on in MLS. And so maybe that's a thing to worry about for Nashville is because it used to be Chicago was the one you looked at. They came in, they won trophies, they were successful, they played in every competition, they were always in the playoffs, they built their own stadium, and then they changed ownership, and then they've done nothing good for like 15 years.
The thing that bothers me with Chicago, is New York and Chicago are both these huge, huge markets. And when you look at St. Louis and Nashville and Columbus, these are way smaller markets, and they've been able to not only build teams that are good, they've been able to build atmospheres and fan bases and stuff like that. What bothers me about Chicago and to an extent New York is that both New York teams, they had that and lost it. And I just, I think for a market like Chicago to not have a presence in MLS is honestly really like sad first, and then second of all, they spend a lot of money. I don't think people understand how much they're spending
Yeah.
on players. They keep buying players, so the no ownership is clearly willing to spend their money. They're just hiring their own guys. And not to turn this into a Chicago show, but I just think it's really that got to be so frustrating for the fans in Chicago because you have an owner who's so okay with spending money with tens of millions of dollars every season on players and then gets nothing out of it. It's ridiculous.
I know it's
Well,
kind of,
like I said, like this sort of thing is instructive. Like these teams that have come in the last few years, Nashville, St. Louis, like if they go through a bad spell, what are they going to do? Because we've seen in so many places, teams lose momentum, fans lose interest, or there are other teams that come up that are more interesting. And so, like, you look at Chicago, you look at New York, especially the Red Bulls, and you're just like, is there a way out of this mess? And I don't know. And that's my chief concern. If anything, if Nashville SC were to have a 10-year stretch like the Titans had when I was coming out of college, what would happen? And it scares me. So I hope
oh,
they start winning games here soon.
I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, I think it'd be very similar to the Predators, where a lot of people didn't know the Predators atmosphere and what that was like between, pre when they started actually making it to the playoffs. But with that, I mean, Nashville has to beat teams in Toronto just in the same fashion that they would have to in hockey and soccer as well. I tried to tie that together. That's perfectly fine. But look,
They're in
we're
a different conference in hockey.
yeah, I know it's fine.
Really work.
Look, we
Yeah.
have two big matches though on this week to try and right the ship. One of those mid MLS weeks for sure. Playing Toronto on Wednesday, and then is Atlanta on Saturday?
Saturday afternoon,
Uh,
midday kickoff.
So look, Toronto is a team that started off not in a great position, and they didn't even start off in a great position against NYCFC on Saturday, but it does seem like Bernadeschi and the team is really starting to kind of come together at the wrong time for Nashville to play them.
Well, for Toronto, they have a brand new coach in John Herdman, who was with the Canadian men's national team. Before that, with the Canadian women's national team, he's had quite a career to look at. But not a whole lot of changes for Toronto other than the coaching staff. And I think what John Herdman brought to this team is different ideas and different beliefs, which I think what a lot of people are crying out for Nashville to do. Interesting to me that Herdman didn't take over Toronto last season, even though he was there in person. He was like, no, I'll start next season because this is a mess I don't want to deal with right now, which I don't blame him at all. So they had an interim to end the season. And then this season, he seemed to have gotten the buy-in from Insigne and Bernadeschi, which was the biggest thing because, man, you got to go back and look at those stories from last year where Bernadeschi was smoking a vape on the plane and whatnot. Really good times. And then Insigne was, crying to be out of Toronto, and Bernadeschi was like, "I'll play for free if you get me out of here," pretty much. So turning that into what he has done is solely on John Herdman. I think he's a contender for coach of the season simply for that.
I mean,
All that aside, yeah.
I'll just say as well, and why standings do not matter in MLS this early in the season. They currently have a -1 goal differential, and they are in fourth place. So Atlanta, though, in a definitely opposite position, I would say, than Toronto. Atlanta more in a position like Nashville.
Yeah, for Atlanta it's the complete opposite because they have the goal scorer in Yakimakis. They have a World Cup winner on their roster in Almada, who's everybody saying, "Oh, his price is 20 million, 30 million. They're gonna sell him in the summer." Not with how things are going. Pineda has been there. The manager Pineda has been there for a while now. He came from Seattle and just never. Atlanta has not looked good. They just lost their third consecutive home game for the first time in their history, losing 3 home games in a row. Yeah, they're only a point ahead of Nashville, even though their roster, if you looked at it before the season, I think a lot of people were predicting them to be top 3, if not top 2 in the Eastern Conference. Deservedly so. They have a really good roster. Looking at the names, they did lose Miles Robinson, which I think is a big deal. Their goalkeeper situation is questionable at best, but they have a really, really good roster. It's going to be the first time Dax McCarty comes back to Geodis Park, not as a Nashville SC player. So I think that's going to be something there. But yeah, Atlanta's not looking good, and Toronto's looking much better, but also not great at the moment.
I mean, it's the clearest example of like money doesn't necessarily equal success in MLS. Like a lot of it comes down to scouting and finding the right guys that fit because both Toronto and Atlanta both spend at a level that Nashville is not in on some of their players and doesn't necessarily mean anything whenever it comes to, but it also means that they can get right if they get a couple games in a row and you just hope that you're not one of those teams that they get right against.
Well, Clay, let's give the predictions for this week. Let's get it started with you.
Well, so you should first follow me at Clay Lassol on Instagram and Twitter. I'm way more active on Twitter. You should also check out Nashville Soccer Archive. I did a lot of work on NashvilleSoccerArchive.com. We have a physical archive at Vanderbilt University. If you have stuff that you would like to donate, this last week I got an email from someone donating a lot of Metro's gear for us. I would very much appreciate it. We're trying to tell the full story of soccer in Nashville. And with that being said, you should also go to the Atlanta game on Saturday at 12:30. Go and have yourself a nice meal, and then meet me at Trevecca Nazarene University as the Toronto, as the Nashville Rhythm will be opening their season in the WPSL at 7 p.m. I'll be there. My wife will be there. We're supporting Nashville Rhythm once again. Nashville Wolves will be on the road against Birmingham, and Tennessee Soccer Club women just started their season with a win against Chattanooga last night. So women's soccer has started in Nashville. These are all amateur teams, so we hope to see you out at some of these matches. But the Rhythm, go there on Saturday. Do a soccer doubleheader in Nashville. So on Wednesday, though, I'm going to take a 2-1 win for Nashville against Toronto, with both goals coming from Hadi Mukhtar, and then a very nervy 1-0 win against Atlanta. Let's have a 6-point week. It's time to turn it around. Goals coming from Surridge.
Toronto is missing Bernardeschi because he got a second yellow for dissent, and then a brawl happened where Sean Johnson was both headbutted and he headbutted somebody. So I don't know who's going to make it from the Toronto side. There might be more players missing.
John Johnson, NSC, baby. We all wanted it. Well, wait, you sorry, my bad.
So I don't know if Sean Johnson is going to get to play. Not that we haven't heard anything about it. Nick Cushing, the NYCFC manager, was accused of punching 19-year-old Maserati from Toronto. Anyway, go look at that. It's a crazy situation. I don't know. Moral stories. I don't know who all from Toronto gets banned or gets fined, or if that plays a part in Nashville. I do think they're going to be discombobulated a little bit just because of what happened in that last game and the way things responded. They are still a good team. I will go ahead and say Nashville SC 2-1 against Toronto with goals from Surridge, both of them. And then against Atlanta, let's go. You know what? I'll join Clay in the 6-point week. I'm ready to come to this show and have people happy to listen to us for once. Let's do a 2-1 as well against Atlanta. Both games 2-1. First one braced by Surridge, second one braced by Mukhtar. Because why not? Oh, follow me at Valer Shabila. I have a new episode of On Air with Valer cooking soon. So go to YouTube, subscribe.
Woo! At PH Steven HD on Twitter and all my fun stuff. Look, with all the stuff that Toronto's going through, I think Nashville is going to do it on Saturday. 2-0 win on a Wednesday night with I got to be honest, I think the crowd is going to be pretty sparse on Wednesday, unfortunately. But it's going to pick everybody's hopes back up. Hadi Mukhtar scores both goals for those, and it's going to pick everybody's hopes up for Saturday, where this team in the afternoon is absolutely going to disappoint the hell out of us because they should beat a terrible Atlanta team, but we're going to lose 2-0 to them at home. And I would be curious on what the voices are going to be like after Nashville loses to Atlanta.
Well, that's a downer, so I'm going to go ahead and bring it up just a little bit before we close it out. And that is that Hani is going to score against Toronto to win the game with a goal that should have been disallowed. And we will set it to Smooth Criminal in honor of Alien Ant Farm being at the game.
All right. Thank you, Clay, for that. I'm glad we're finishing the show on that one because I'm depressing. So thank you again so much for listening to the show. We appreciate it. We know it's a busy week, especially with soccer. So we're going to try to get this out pretty quickly. And then, of course, we'll be back next week to talk about both of those matches, whether it's in a happy space or not. I don't know. We'll let the week determine the results for us. So thank you again so much for listening to the show. And we will talk to you next week. I hope you all have a good one.